So, I wanted to address this video a little more accurately. I want to address it by logging onto a character I've been playing relatively recently, or that I've been playing a decent amount relatively recently, and I needed them to specifically not be a rogue or barbarian who has extra gear slots. So I'm picking this character, and you'll try and see why. Because a lot of people have been talking lately about the end game for this game sucks, they're leaving, blah blah blah. Well, I want to discuss that, and I want to discuss the gearing problem, and I think I have the answer as to why the end game sucks, and how to actually improve upon it without changing as much as a lot of people say. I think the end game in this game is relatively close to good. It's very similar to D3, which a lot of people dislike that. But D3 also had a pretty lively player base for a long time in its end game, and in its Eternal Realm, for many reasons, or its version of an Eternal Realm. So, let's discuss this for a minute. The first problem is that there's 4 factions of the community that you have to address off the bat. The first part of the community you have to address is the people who are going to play the campaign, and then they're going to be done. Like, as soon as they get to Chaldeum, as soon as they clear the campaign, they're done with the game. They might do some side content. They might, you know, if they're around level 50, they might clear Cathedral of Light. They might do a couple of favors. But by the time 55 rolls around, they are done if they're not done before that. They're just here for the story and to move on to the next game. Then you have the people that are waiting to get tidied over until the next game comes out, where they're like, oh yeah, this is fun. These are kind of the drop in, drop out whales too that are also buying this overpriced shit from the shop, where they're essentially coming in, they're looking at this stuff, and they're going, oh, okay, you know, I'll look cool for a little while. But they're not really RPG players. They're kind of just waiting for the next game to come out. New Madden just came out, new 2K is coming out on the horizon. Call of Duty, we don't know what this year's Call of Duty release is going to be. They're waiting on that to come out. Waiting for the next game to drop. And D4 just happened to release in the dead span where not a lot of great games have really released. BG3 is coming out for PS4 next month, and for Xbox, we don't know when. PC's loving BG3. People keep talking about BG3 is going to be the D4 killer. Well, let's discuss the reason why. Because we're taking those 2 player bases out of the equation. We're just going to talk about the other 2 parts of the player base, which are the hardcore Diablo 2 and the hardcore Diablo 3 players that are here for the long haul. They're here to grind this, and they're getting flamed out quickly. And why is that? The main problem is that the design of the game was based around casuals. If you look, a casual player discounting the campaign is going to say, oh my god, there's so much content to do. Because you have to look. Alright, so first you beat the campaign. Then after you beat the campaign, what do you have? You have the Tree of Whispers content where you're running around doing Tree of Whispers. You have Altars of Lilith that you have to go hunt down and claim for stat bonuses. You have the Aspect Dungeons where you have to grind up and complete all the Aspect Dungeons in order to complete your Codex of Power. Right? You have... Then after that, you have the strongholds that you need to do. Okay, besides the strongholds that you need to do, you have hell tides that spawn randomly in World Tier 3. If you're in World Tier 3, then you have access to, you know, the Nightmare Dungeon, so you can go do Nightmare Dungeons. There's World Tier 4. There's Uber Lilith when you're at level 100 in World Tier 4. There's the PvP area. There's world bosses that spawn sporadically. There's Legion events that spawn sporadically, right? So there's all this content to do on the surface level, and that's not including events and treasure goblins and butchers. But let's talk about this for a minute. Butchers, treasure goblins are guaranteed loot drops. That's what they do. They post challenges. If you can kill the treasure goblin fast enough and you're 35 and above, you're guaranteed a legendary, which they just now added to the game. That wasn't in them before. And for Nightmare Dungeons, for dungeons and Nightmare Dungeons, you have to do them in order to get a butcher to spawn. Butcher spawns can be random. You can go 4 dungeons in a row and get a butcher in each dungeon. I got 2 butchers today, which is the first time I've gotten a butcher in almost 2 weeks of playing the game. Relatively on and off. Not playing it every day, or not playing a lot every day, no more than, say, an hour a day. But I've had hardcore grind sessions where I'm here for 8 to 12 hours a day playing over the course of a couple of days, no butcher spawns. I got 2 today. I played today. Butcher spawns are random. You can't count on those. Treasure goblins are random. You can't count on those. Events are on a timer, sure, but events are only worth it if you get the mastery. They're only giving you decent gear and experience if A, you can get there early enough and stoke the campfire, which most people don't know that for the experience side of things, or B, if you can get the mastery and you can get the extra loot. Otherwise, Legion events are worthless. I don't even want to do Legion events most of the time unless I'm in a group of people. World bosses are another interesting thing. World bosses are really fun battles. I like world bosses as a concept. However, the problem that world bosses have is that a lot of people feel like they're very repetitive. Remember, there's only 3 world bosses. They're on a timer. They function relatively the same to each other, but people have differing opinions. Some world bosses are immensely more difficult than others. Like, and a lot of people have their opinions as to what's the favorite, what's not. Some bosses might be easy to kill. One boss might be easy to kill, but they're relatively difficult to hit. And if you're not on the right build for it, you're not going to enjoy playing it. Whereas another boss that likes to just sit still and does a lot of damage might be your preferred one, even though it's harder to do. Okay, well, what do world bosses drop you? 1 legendary and a cash. And that cash, I'll have a legendary most of the time. The loot reward isn't that great off of it. Main thing is it gives you 5 favors. It gives you at least 1 legendary off of it. And it's a fun event to do. The PvP area has no real content to do to speak of, other than there's higher rates of elites. They drop the seeds. You go turn in the seeds at an altar. When you turn in the seeds at the altar, you get the seeds, right? And PvP is dominated by high-level players that beat up on lower-level scrubs, or lower-level trap players that run around, kill people, grab their seeds, and then come back to the main PvP area and call up their buddy who's in 80 and above to come in and wipe whole groups of people, get the seeds, and they're out. There's a lot of content to do over here, but you're always running the risk that you're under-leveled because you don't know who's over here. You would not believe how many times I go down to World Tier 2 or World Tier 1 to help somebody grind campaign, and I come over to a PvP area to find that there's a level 100 over here in World Tier 2 just mowing people down instantaneously. That takes this out. Strongholds are kind of one-and-done type events, as are aspect dungeon farming. Sure, you can go back and keep redoing them for renown and things of that nature, but once you have the altars for the first time, once you have the dungeon for the first time, once you have the stronghold for the first time, for your renown, there is no reason to go back and do it again. Yes, you have the ability to reset dungeons, which is nice and all. It lets you keep doing that content over and over if you like it, particularly if there's a certain stronghold that you like. I like Karayusa. Karayusa is a good stronghold that I like doing. It's quick. I can clear it relatively quickly, as an example, but I don't reset the dungeon on it because that resets pretty much all of them. But those are like content you're going to be doing once and done. Specifically for the concept of leveling and looting, what are you doing to progress? Well, Tree of Whispers is good in the early game. And the reason why is it's overworld content. This forces you to complete your renown. This helps you as you're completing renown. You can do most of your surface level renown outside of the aspect dungeons while you're doing Tree of Whispers content. You pop back to the Tree of Whispers and you're able to claim your loot, which will give you a sizable chunk of experience for leveling and some gear out of it. Now, the gear is not very helpful most of the time, but if you're leveling 1 to 50 and you're skipping the campaign, this is the best way to level, because it's giving you gear along the way that you can either sell or salvage. This is why I want to mention this. Right? Speaking of the concept of gear, the gearing is the problem with the endgame, which we're going to get to that in a few minutes. I want to highlight that that's the major issue with this game's survivability, because I'm starting to get long in the tooth. Tree of Whispers content, however, immediately goes out the window as soon as you hit about level 55. You can do it on a while. I do it every now and then, especially if I've done something that gave me like 4 or 5 favors. Like right now, I can go do a world boss, or I can go do a level 5 aspect dungeon. But the majority of the time, I kind of settle into this routine where I'll do a world boss, and as soon as I'm done with the world boss, I'll come over to the PvP area, kill a seething abomination, 5 and 5, because I can have those done relatively quickly. And then unpack a True Whispers, I claim my cash. I basically get 2 caches for free, because I get one from the world boss, and I get one from the True Whispers. Open it up, decent chunk of experience. It's not great anymore once you're over level 55, but it's nice. It does give you that dopamine rush, like you're doing something, right? Like, yeah, content type rush having no reason. Well, let's look at Helltide. Now, Helltide helps offset part of the problem that the game has right now. One of the problems that the game has is that overworld content is actively detrimental to the player once you hit 55, because if you begin fighting things that are lower level than you lose experience compared to fighting enemies at your level. Now, they did this to make the player feel empowered, but what it does is it reinforces the point that the only content to do in the end game is either Helltides or Nightmare Dungeons. Now, the repetition of Helltide and Nightmare Dungeons are not a problem in and of themselves. So let's look. In a Helltide, you have these areas that are high-level areas. They're always going to be 3 levels higher than you, sorry. So I'm level 59. If I go to this area right now, it's going to change from 59 to 63 when I'm out in the world. There's events that are out here. There's more elites than normal. There's more enemies than normal. They drop crafting materials more than normal, especially some of the crafting materials that you need, right? Some of the things that you need Fiend Roses. You need, scroll down, Forgotten Souls. These are the 2 most valuable things that you will go to Helltide to do. At early game, I was struggling to get these. After a few characters, there's no way I'm burning through 205 Fiend Roses and 214 Forgotten Souls anytime in the near future. I wouldn't have to do Helltide at all. But the main reason that you would go out and you do Helltide, you go to Helltide, you go kill enemies, you grind up cinders, you have to go online to look up the Chest of Mystery for 250. You go over, let's say it spawns over here. There's usually a spawn somewhere over here on it. You go over here, you spend your 250, then you go out and do it again. Now they're on hour 15, they're on 1 hour timers, okay? So what you have to do is you have to grind, you have to get there at the start. If you're less than 30 minutes on that Helltide timer, you're not doing Helltide. You do not have enough time for Chest of Mysteries. And there's a significant difference between Chest of Mystery versus other chests. You can open chests, you can target farm what you want. So, you know, you could have a chest here for 75, a chest here for 125, the 75 for armor, the 125 is for light weapons, you have a chest here for 150, that's heavy weapons or your two-handed weapons, right? Those are going to give you a maximum of 2 legendaries and or sacred yellows, a couple of elixirs, and some crafting material. That's what you get out of one of those chests. Chest of Mystery, when it spawns, which is 250, is guaranteed 2 legendaries or uniques. I've gotten 5 to 6. Plus elixirs, harder to get elixirs, plus gold, plus a bigger chunk of experience. But the problem is I have to bring up the web browser on my PlayStation, or if you're on PC, you have to pull up another page, find out where it is, pin it on your map over here, say, oh, it's over here. Get over there and open it. That's kind of problematic. Now, a lot of people don't want to go through the trouble casually. They'll play in a group, they'll rely on the one friend to go do it. But what does this have to do with endgame? What does this have to do with gearing? Well, this is one of the 2 main activities that you're going to be reliably doing in endgame. Remember, Legion events, butchers, treasure goblins, world bosses are all random events or timered events that aren't consistent enough to realistically do. Another great example, True Whispers content is always available, but if it's something you don't want to, it's not rewarding enough to really be endgame content. If they buffed up True Whispers, similar to what they did with Helltide, where Helltide is stronger, if they made it to where while you're in an area and grinding Tree of Whispers content, enemies are set to be 2 or 3 levels higher than you, or at your level, or a level higher than you if you want to do it that way. That would make Tree of Whispers content more rewarding right now than this is 54 to 59, which means as soon as I'm into the 60s, this content becomes worthless to me. At 59 now, it's okay. So that leads me to the next problem, which are Nightmare Dungeons. Now, Nightmare Dungeons, again, similar to Hell Tides, they're an interior version, whereas Hell Tides are open world content, which that's really the only time I want to do open world content. But I'm on a timer. If I log into the game and there's 10 minutes left in a Hell Tide, I'm screwed for another hour and a half. Gotta wait an hour and a half for that. Back to Nightmare Dungeons. Now, Nightmare Dungeons are the primary source of experience. There's a decent amount of variety. Now, in World Tier 3, the amount of sigils you have to choose from is fucking dog shit. I can't tell you how many times in a row we have just spent a day where we're choosing sigils randomly, and we do Heretics Asylum 5 or 6 times. Or the other one that a friend of mine hates. I know I have one. Tons of these. You see how many of these are just the same fucking name over and over again? Betrayer's Row. You don't know how many times we either run Heretics Asylum or Betrayer's Row. It's just we're running things randomly, what we have in the stat. And we end up running, 5 to 6 of the same fucking dungeon, which are all Betrayer's Row or all Heretics Asylum. It gets very repetitive. And also because each individual Nightmare Dungeon is exactly the same for the location. The affixes that are on there are going to be different. Alright, look at these two. These two are both Tier 8 Tomb of the Saints, right? This one right here, you deal more fire damage. First off, who the fuck does that benefit? That benefits a 1 niche Barbarian Berserking build. Any sorceress with any type of fire going on for their kit. Necros get fucked, Rogues get fucked, Druids get fucked. Bye-bye. See you later. You don't get to play the game. But that's your one buff that you, the player, get. And everything else is negative. This one is Avenger. And then the other one is where they deal an additional percentage of their physical damage is dealt as a resistance. Resistances don't matter, so that one right there is pretty much worthless. It's basically just, oh, they deal a little bit more damage than this. The main thing you're looking at is that middle line of text. And if you get an Ancestral Dungeon, I don't think I have any. Oh, no, I have a Tier 90, or Tier 20, where this one has even more affixes on it that are negative against you, right? But the thing, and the levels are also fixed. So, if you notice, I don't have any Nightmare Sigils that are lower than 5. And the reason because of this is that all Nightmare Dungeons scale based off of the tier. So, 53 plus tier is the level for Sacred Nightmare Sigils, and for Ancestral Nightmare Sigils, it's 54 plus the tier. So what that means is that this Tier 5 is a 58. That means the enemies are level 58 in that dungeon. The majority of the time. Sometimes there's a few exceptions, right? This is so if I have, say, a Tier 10 Nightmare Dungeon, that's going to be level 63. So there's solid ways to level. The enemy density is there. Monsters drop better loot in there. Okay, great. Now, this is also the only way you can level up your glyphs, which leveling up your glyphs is very important to getting increased bonuses. So as an example, this is the main glyph that I'm running on this character. The 1.6% increased damage to vulnerable targets is what scales, not the additional bonus, just the primary first bonus. You would look at this and say that this isn't that valuable. Okay, that's where you're wrong. This is giving me 8.6% vulnerable damage, and I can obviously buff this the more I would be leveling the character. I have this in this slot just because it's dexterity. It requires dexterity. This starting board has a decent amount of dexterity in it that I don't really have to go out of my way to go get. I could slot this into another board with more dexterity, and this would be great. But for the build I'm running, I need this dexterity. There's a lot of glyphs that are out there, as you can see. Generally, you're only going to run a select handful, so I start target farming and leveling some of the other ones here. You see some of these get bigger bonuses. The more things you buy in the radius, the more of a benefit they get. Here's the problem that you have with this system. Nightmare Dungeons are the only way to level that. Now let's talk about gear a little bit. If the primary purpose is that you're doing the same activities over and over again, a lot of people want to be rewarded for their time. See, look, a Legion event just popped up. It's gotta be a Legion event, it's not a World Boss. Yeah, it's a Legion event that popped up. I'm not gonna go do that. Because, yeah, I caught it early enough, I can get there in time, sure. I can't guarantee I'm gonna get the mastery on it, I don't want to do it. This build's not cooking yet where I can hard carry an entire group by myself. This build is a little bit on the squishy side compared to what I would like. But let's look at gear, right? The reason why I specifically wanted to pick a druid, a necro, a sorcerer is that 9 is the minimum number of legendary slots. Now, legendary spots are based around your aspects right here. So if you see I have 3 types of aspects, we can cover these real quick. These ones right here are weapons. These are one-handed or two-handed weapons, gloves, amulets, rings. The reason why I excluded the barbarians and the rogues is they get more legendary aspect slots than the other characters. So I wanted the other characters because they're a baseline. The defensive slots are for your helm, chest, pants, and amulet. We're not going to talk about shield, that's necromancer only. And the utility slot goes towards helm, chest, boots, gloves, amulet. So basically, it's a defensive, they're defensive that ropes in boots as opposed to pants, whereas the defensive ones are these 3. So you have 3 defensive aspect slots that you're generally going to be juggling. So you'll assign what you want them to be as you're building your character and you're going through. Same thing. Most characters are only guaranteed 2 offensive slots, that being the gloves and their weapon if you use a two-handed weapon. Rings are kind of this flex slot where the rings can be either offensive or they can be resource-based. Now, if you don't need the resource generation that your class or build needs, then you don't have to worry about using rings. These can be offensive. So now you go up from 2 to 4. The amulet's kind of that wild card. If you need more defense, you're going to throw an amulet on. You'll do the defense on the amulet. If you need an offensive aspect, an extra offensive aspect, if you need to go up to 5, you'll chuck it on your amulet. That's the majority of what you're going to do. The reason why this is so important is because this is the problem with gearing. So you see I have all these aspects on my character. Okay. In my stash right here, I have all this gear. This is where I store the gear that I'm switching actively between characters. Or like general purpose aspects that, you know, I'm going to pull off and put on another character when they start to run out. Right? Here's the problem with gearing. It's very difficult to upgrade your gear. 1 through 50, gear doesn't matter at all for the most part. Or 1 through 40, gear doesn't matter at all for the most part. You're trying to make your build. You're trying to get your build where you want it to be in terms of, you know, whatever your class thing is, whether it's spirit boons or the enchantments. You're trying to level your skills. You're trying to level your tree. You kind of come in and you're like, okay, well, where can I put stuff and get value out of it, right? That's the main benefit. You're leveling your skills individually. You sit there and go, okay, I want this, this, and this. Fine and dandy. Now, 40 to 50, you want to start getting better yellows and turning them into legendaries. And the reason is you don't know how long gear is going to sit. You know, I don't have any normals on me. Everything is sacred now. Okay? But some of these slots can go a very long time without upgrading. I literally just upgraded this ring today because it got lightning damage, critical strike damage, and lucky hit chance that I wanted. I wanted 3. Those were 3 of the aspects on the ring that I wanted. I didn't want the other aspect. I re-rolled it. So this is the first problem with gearing. It's very difficult to gear in this game because you don't have a lot of control over what you can do. If you notice, almost every single piece of gear that I own has that little reroll symbol next to it. Ranks of wolves, willpower, intelligence, potion drop rate, dodge chance, willpower, vulnerable damage, max life, cooldown reduction. Why? Because you could only reroll 1 slot. So here's the first problem. You have to find a decent yellow or a decent legendary, and it needs to have a lot of things going for it. 1, it needs to be around the same armor or better. or around the same damage, or better, in order for you to run it. Because you don't want to just upgrade your stats a little bit just to downgrade your armor and have a hard time killing things, right? So you can't really look at anything lower. Like right now, if I go and buy weapons, if I go and gamble for weapons, whatever it is, I'm looking anything that is not 1700 minimum, scrap, 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 scrap. It's not worth it. It's not an improvement over what I currently have. It's not, it's going to be harder to make it an improvement over what I currently have. No. Boots and pants have specific powers tied to them. Now, the power that's tied to pants, I don't really give a shit about. Like, this one is, while injured, your potion also grants movement speed. That's not really a great one. The boots, I want double dodge boots. I want the extra dodge chance. I don't like how the evade system in the game works. I want as many evades as I can. So basically what I do is I'm looking for any boots that are non-max evade charges go in the trash. I have 2 max evades on all my characters. Sometimes I have 3 max evades on all of my characters. You know what happens? Any boots that are lower than that, they go in the trash. And we don't touch them. Because they're trash. Then the next problem that you have is you need the majority of your rolls to be decent. Now, I'm not one of those people who's uber finite going over stuff. Like, if you look at this chest right here, most people would tell you that this chest is shit because of the 4 rolls. What you want on it is you want damage reduction from close enemy, damage reduction from distant enemy, damage reduction while fortified, or total armor. You want, like, all of those rolls on that. I'm not picky for that. I need more max life. It's a relatively squishy build right now. I'm using storm skills. I'll take storm skill damage. I want willpower, that's main stat. The dexterity's kind of meh. You know, or if you look at the pants, it's giving me ranks to a skill I use. It's giving me main stat. It's giving me 1 or 2 bonuses I can work with. I can deal with this. But the issue is, I need the stats to be relatively decent. Okay? If you look at these gloves right here that I have, this is the second problem. Once you find a piece of gear, I would go into this piece of gear, even though it's a lower item power than my gloves, because it has better stuff on it. It has ranks to a skill I use, it has main stat, it has crit strike chance, lucky hit, chance to slow, extra crowd control. I'm happy with that. My current gloves are not main stat. They have lightning critical strike damage, critical strike chance, and all stats. Now, all stats is kind of nice, but I can do without that. The crit chance is there. It doesn't have willpower. Instead of keep spending and re-rolling these, I'll just upgrade it into this. But that leaves me the second problem. Legendary aspects. This is the only copy of this aspect that I have, gaining the additional companion. This is an aspect that I use. So these gloves are going to sit here until I either find a better one or I get another copy of the companion skill. And that's kind of the problem with gearing. As you run nightmare dungeons, and you keep running nightmare dungeons, what I'll do is I'll take the extra aspects off of gear. Once I have about 3 copies of each aspect that I plan on using for my build, you know what happens to the rest of them? They get sold and they get salvaged, because I don't need more than 3. Maybe if it's an aspect that a lot of my characters use, like Audacity for the stun, or Shared Misery for the crowd control spread, I'll put extra copies in the stash. But even then, I can pick and choose between high rolls. Like, if you look at a couple of these aspects, okay, this right here is at 20%. That's a max roll, right? 19%, just short of a max roll. 19%, just short of a max roll, right? I'm not keeping anything that's not 17 and above. If it's not 17 or above, I'm not keeping it. Why would I want a low roll aspect when I have all these aspects that are relatively high? So I can run 4 nightmare dungeons in an hour, and then I'll get maybe 1 piece of gear that's an improvement. Now, some aspects are harder to find. This one right here I just got today. I just upgraded my ring. I had a build in mind that I was going to do for my ring, but I ended up rocking this one instead because I wanted to try this aspect. This is a new aspect. This is the first time I've gotten this. Same thing with uniques. Most uniques in the game are relatively trash because you can't do anything to adjust them. How it rolls is how it rolls. Like, okay, look at this one right here, Vasili's Prayer. lightning resist, max life, overpower, shapeshift. This is designed for Earth and Werebear, okay? Let's say I don't want to overpower. Let's say I'm not trying to run overpower Werebear for whatever reason. Meme build, fuck it. I want to reroll that overpower damage off. Can't do it. You want to know what you can do to a unique to improve it? You can upgrade it 4 or 5 times. That's what you can do to it. That's all you get to do to it. You can't make any other changes to it. So, the problem with this system is that because uniques can't be changed in any way, you're kind of stuck. A lot of players don't want to run uniques unless they're core elements of their build. A Werebear Druid has to run Insatiable Fury. You want that bonus. That's fine. You know, look at a great example is a Werewolf Druid, right? Werewolf Druids run the Mad Wolf Glee on their chest, and they run Tempest Roar for the head. Those are like the 2 uniques that are mandatory. And they have to do it because of how good the bonus is for the build. The problem is, a normal build, let's say like a sorceress, you have 3 copies of the same pair of pants. And they have decent stuff. Damage to frozen enemies, freeze duration, intelligence. But they're not giving me a plus to any of my skills. They're not giving me anything defensively at all. They're offensive pants, and it takes up a valuable defensive aspect slot that Sorceress needs. Sorceress uses a lot more defensive aspects, especially Ice Sorceress, because standing in Blizzard granting damage reduction, Ice Armor getting crowd control immunity, increasing armor. Those 2 alone, I can run those 2 with these pants. I can't run anything else. That's what I can run. Not anything else, just that. So because of that system, because you're kind of managing your legendary aspects, once you know what you want for your legendary aspects, you're not going to change your gear around unless you have a significant improvement, you're jumping world tiers, or you get a new aspect or unique that you want to try. Like I did with this one. I discovered I like it. It's the max roll at that too. I'm going to stick with this for a while. This is pretty good. This also has stats on it that I want. I'm using all 4 of these stats. This ring is what you would call an endgame ring. This ring, right now, can last me into the 80s and 90s, even though the item power is lower. Because that's the other thing. The key item power that you want is 720. 720 is the max item power. So from there, everything's just going up. There's no rolling down when you go up between item tiers. So you might look and say, well, you could find a piece of gloves in the environment, for example, that are, 760. But if it doesn't have multiple of the stats on it that I want, it's still worthless, because I can only change one of those. If the armor on it is like 200 for whatever reason, I doubt that would be the case, but still, why would I run it? You know, weapons are the only thing where the item power doesn't necessarily matter on them. It's the damage per second, and that scales as you level. As you get higher level, you'll find higher damage per second items in the game. But the problem with that system is, that's not a guarantee. There's a lot that can go wrong in the item process in terms of gearing. It's very difficult to gear and upgrade. And the reason why I'm showing this character's build, right? I did a Helltide today and opened 3 chests of mysteries. A world boss, a seething abomination, 2 butchers, 3 treasure goblins, and 2 events. You want to know how many pieces of gear I was able to upgrade? I upgraded my pants. I actually lost some armor, but I got willpower and the 2 ranks of hurricane. I upgraded my gloves, but only because it was lightning critical strike damage and critical strike chance were on it. I upgraded my chest, but this was a piece of gear that I had sitting in my stash for the next time I played this character. Another character of mine picked this up for this character, and we tweaked it, made it work. I upgraded my amulet, but my amulet was a rare. It was World Tier 2 amulet. My ring was a World Tier 2 amulet that I upgraded. And then this ring, which is still the same ring I was running before, just with a new aspect on it. So I have a new aspect on here. I upgraded 2 pieces of gear that were World Tier 2. A piece of gear that was from in my stash that another character had unlocked. I realistically only upgraded 2 pieces of gear naturally. One of which was more of a lateral change than an upgrade. Actually, they both kind of were. And even then, this is more of a lateral change than an upgrade. So, if all of the run that I did today yielded me barely any change, and I picked up about 5 to 6 levels in that run, what was the point of me playing all that? That's why the endgame feels bad. A lot of people talk about there's nothing to do in endgame. I disagree. There's plenty to do in endgame. It's not rewarding enough. In D3, you're constantly upgrading your gear with better and better stats. The higher you go, the better you get until you're reaching like tier 16 and pushing greater rifts into the hundreds. Then at that point, your builds, if you're clearing that, your build's plateaued and you're mid-maxing. The problem here is in this game, you start mid-maxing at 55. And when you make the jump to World Tier 4 at level 70, you have the same problem from 70 to 75 when you're getting Ancestrals. And then the occasional rare piece of loot that improves your build will drop. That's not even including Uber uniques, not even including the mandatory uniques for some builds like Tempest Roar. And because there's a limited amount of character slots, there's 10, you can't just build a new character, grind them up to the same point, get bored, go do another one like I can in D2. I have 10 characters to work with. If I get bored of my 10 characters, I'm done with the game. Go do something else. 10 characters, that's what you got. That's what you got. There's no, you want to play seasonal? You want to try seasonal content? Great, go delete one of your characters. Do that. What they need to do is they need to find a system to reward players as they grind, as they play at level 100. The item, to me, the way it should work is your damage per second on weapons needs to continue going up. It should not be like the highest damage weapon that I've seen is like a 3300 crossbow for rogue. That's like the highest damage, individual damage per second. Why is that the cap? I had a one-handed sword in D4 that was unmodded. It was an ancient red border in D3, one-handed sword, 4,000. Why does that game have this game beat? Look at armor as well. Armor's a relatively new stat. Why does most armor cap out in the 16 to 1800 range? I haven't seen a piece of armor that's 2 grand. Why not? You want to bet, oh, it'll break the game. True, but it will keep giving players an investment to grind for better gear. Not pay-to-win gear, which I'm sure they're going to start trying to throw that shit into the shop. I'm sure they're going to start saying, hey, if you buy these prestige cosmetics that cost $25, you can get a weapon too. A legendary or a unique weapon. Imagine if these weren't cosmetic and these actually had a pay-to-win fucking weapon in them. People would laugh at this game. But that's kind of what the system is. It feels like you're playing a much grindier version of a slot machine. So to me, the obvious answer to fix the game is not add more stuff to do in endgame. Obviously, that's the plan. You want more content to do in the endgame, but how long is it before you get bored? You need new content in the endgame by creating a new reward. You need improvements to gear. You need improvements to upgrading gear. Improvements to processing gear. Because gear and building your character are the main components to this game. That's the main thing. That and clearing more difficult challenges. Well, they've already showed, based off of how they've nerfed shit, players can clear everything in this game relatively easily. That's not the issue. What they need to do is they need to fix gear. We need better gear.